Sixth grade, we're ready to start chapter 5, lesson 2 today. Lesson 1 was all about the geography of the Nile River Valley, the longest river, and how the Egyptians learned to control the floods because they were seasonal and consistent, get water into their fields, grow that surplus crop, have enough food so that other people could do what they needed to do. That's going to obviously allow them to stay in one place for long enough to develop their civilization. And so if we remember, when we develop that civilization, we have to have a government. We hinted at that in the last lesson. You have to have a religion, a writing system, social classes. So those things that we talked about from previous chapters that you have to have, we're going to start to cover. Last lesson we covered the writing system with hieroglyphics. This this lesson, we'll spend a lot of time talking about their government with their pharaoh, the religions that they believed in, a lot of their contributions that they made, and then their social classes. Okay, so we're going to learn what in lesson 2 life in Egypt was like. The essential question is what makes a culture unique. So we're going to learn to study their culture, their values that they held to. The Egyptian pharaohs were all-powerful rulers. Egyptians built such gigantic and sturdy pyramids in their honor that the pyramids still stand today. So we're going to learn about their fantastic culture and see what we think about it. Around 2600 BC, Egyptian civilizations entered a period known as the Old Kingdom. Remember, we ended yesterday talking Old, Middle, New. It lasted until about 2200, so we got about 400 years. During these years, the Egyptians built magnificent cities and increased trade. They also formed a unified government. The Egyptians prized unity. They understood the importance of everyone working and living according to similar principles and beliefs. Therefore, they developed a government under an all-powerful ruler who controlled both religious and political affairs. A government in which the same person is both a political leader and a religious leader is called a theocracy. So you got your first note filled in, guys, a theocracy, but I think as we study ancient history, I always ask myself, hey, what can I learn from people in the past today? The Egyptians prize unity. Think about America, we do the exact opposite, don't we? We're always in discord. Republicans don't get along with Democrats, and they're dividing our country, aren't they? They're always yelling at each other, and so as I watch the news, what am I taught? I'm taught it's okay to yell and be disrespectful to people who don't think the same way you think, and therefore America's civilization is struggling right now, isn't it? And so Egypt said, we got to learn how to get along. What's one way we're going to get along? We're going to put an all-powerful person who not only runs our government, but also is our religious leader. And I think that's really important. Now, obviously in America, our president is not our religious leader, guys. But what it comes down to is, if we don't all believe the same things, if I don't have the same motivation, then it's really hard for me to follow my political leader. In other words, what motivates me to listen to the president? Well, my God does. So because religion is so important in my life, and my religion says you need to obey the government, whether I agree with what the president is doing or not, I have to be respectful because my religion is telling me that. Well, what happens if I don't have religion in my life? Then I think it's okay to be disrespectful, don't I? And that's what we're struggling with in America today. Now in Egypt, it's completely different. We're going to see why. At first, the Egyptian ruler was called a king. Later, he became known as Pharaoh. The word Pharaoh originally meant great house, so number 2, Pharaoh. It referred to the grand palace in which the king and his family lived. So guys, it's kind of like what we do today. If I say, hey, I'm going to the White House, you instantly think about visiting the president, don't you? Where the place where he lives is literally going along with the person who lives there. That's what they did there. So Pharaoh literally meant the great house. So I wouldn't say I'm going to the White House, I'd say I'm going to the Pharaoh. And then that eventually meant the person you were there, and so then they just took that title. The Egyptians were fiercely loyal, number 3, to the pharaoh because they believed that a strong ruler unified their kingdom. The pharaoh held total power. He issued commands that had to be obeyed. Egyptians believed that a pharaoh's wise and far-reaching leadership would help their kingdom survive such disasters as war and famine. So I hope you walk the fine line, guys. Do we want to be fiercely loyal? Yes. Is it a blessing? Great. What does it mean, though? It means that the pharaoh needs to make good decisions. And when does the loyalty break down? When the pharaoh gives commands that are hard to obey. So you think biblical times, all of a sudden Pharaoh says, kill all the Israelite baby boys. Well, there had to be people in Egypt go, really? You want me to murder a brand new baby? I'm not really good with that, Pharaoh, right? And so that's always a challenge, guys, of how do we show loyalty even when we disagree with that's happening. The Egyptians were motivated. They said if a disaster hits like a war or famine, it's because we weren't loyal to the Pharaoh. So they always blame themselves instead of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh appointed bureaucrats. A bureaucrat is a government official to carry out his orders. Bureaucrats supervise the construction and repair of dams, irrigation canals, brick granaries. Granaries were used to store grain from bountiful harvests so that people would not starve during times of poor harvest. In other words, the government controlled that, guys. That was Joseph. It's not you keep your own grain that you grow. It's you give all the grain to the government, and then the government will give it back to you at the right time. So you can see the power of the Pharaoh and then the bureaucrats. Today we use that term too, government officials who work in our government to run the things of our government. The Pharaoh owned all the land in Egypt and could use it as he pleased. The Pharaoh's officials collected tax payments of grain from farmers. The Pharaoh then distributed land to officials, priests, and wealthy Egyptians whom he favored. So you're back with number 5. So all of Egypt belongs to Pharaoh. He gives it out to who he likes. So that's going to motivate me to listen, isn't it? I'm going to listen to the Pharaoh here because he's the one that can give me land, okay? In Egyptian art here, guys, many times the bigger the picture is, the more important it is. And so you can see lots of times they'll shrink down the size of servants and increase the size of important people. That's why Pharaoh takes up this whole thing, and then you can have smaller ones only get half a size. Page 2 says this. Egyptians were also loyal to Pharaoh because they thought he was the son of Re. Now, most times I've seen it spelled R-A and pronounced Ra, Ra the sun god. Some have Re the sun god, and your history book spells Re this way. So if you ever see it in the future, just R-A, it's the same thing. So he's the Egyptian sun god. They believe their Pharaoh was a god on earth who protected Egypt. So you got number 6 there. He was a god. They literally believed Pharaoh, not represented God, not sent by God. He was a god. He was the son of Re, the sun god, the most powerful one. Whenever the Pharaoh appeared in public, people played music on flutes and cymbals and bowed their heads. As Egypt's religious leader, the Pharaoh participated in ceremonies, number 7 in your notes, to help the kingdom thrive. For example, the Pharaoh rode a bull around Memphis because the Egyptians believed that this would help keep the soil fertile. It might help you also understand why Aaron built a golden calf as the false idol in the Bible. The Pharaoh was also the first person to cut the ripened grain at harvest time. Egyptians believed this action would produce abundant crops. So a lot of respect for their Pharaoh. Religion influenced every aspect of Egyptian life. Like the people of Mesopotamia, ancient Egyptians, that's number 8 in your notes, guys. Ancient Egyptians worshiped many gods and goddesses. That's called polytheism, if you remember. The people of Egypt, however, thought their gods were more powerful. The Egyptians believed these deities, that's a fancy word for gods, controlled natural forces as well as human activities. The Egyptians depended on the sun to grow their crops and on the Nile River to make the soil fertile. Thus, 2 of the most crucial gods were the sun god Re and the river god Hapi, so river into here. Another important god was Osiris. We met him yesterday at the beginning. According to legend, Osiris was an early pharaoh who gave the Egyptian people laws and taught them farming. His wife, Isis, represented the faithful wife and mother. Osiris and Isis together ruled the world of the dead. Thoth was the god of learning. He could take human or animal form, or both, as most gods or goddesses could do. Okay, so lots of times in your Egyptian art, you'll see this, guys. This is a picture of their gods. Can take human and animal form to do those things. So you got some of their gods, guys. They're also polytheistic, and the Egyptians had a lot of respect for their gods and goddesses. Let's find out why. The Egyptians had a positive view of the afterlife. They're just like us, guys. You and I believe in the afterlife. We believe there is life after death. We also have a positive view of it because we believe heaven is going to be better than what we're living on right now. They believe that life after death would be better than the present life. So back over here, guys, you just got number 10. Life would be better in the afterlife. After a long journey, the dead arrived at a place of peace. So you're now going to start to see a lot of differences between our belief in the afterlife and theirs, but just understand they believed in the next life. And what motivates people in society to behave. I behave, why? Because I believe there's a life after death. One of the most important writings of ancient Egypt, you're into number 11, important writings, was the Book of the Dead. Egyptians studied its prayers and magic spells to prepare for the afterlife. They believed that Osiris greeted those who had just died at the gate to the next world. If people had led good lives and knew the spells, Osiris would give them eternal life. This passage from the Book of the Dead explains what a person who enters the happy afterlife can expect. Wheat and barley shall be given unto him therein, and he shall flourish there just as he did upon the earth. So if you live a good life on this earth, you'll live a good life in the next one. The early Egyptians believed that only the pharaohs could enjoy the afterlife. They thought that the pharaoh's soul resided in his body and that the body had to be protected in order for the soul to complete the journey to the afterlife. There, the pharaoh would continue to protect Egypt. If the pharaoh's body decayed after death, his soul would not have a place to live. The pharaoh would not survive in the afterlife. As the centuries passed, however, Egyptians came to believe that the afterlife was not only for pharaohs. All people, rich and poor, could hope for eternal life with the help of the god Osiris. As a result, the process of embalming emerged so that Egyptians could protect bodies for the afterlife. Okay, so let's go back to our notes. They started with embalming, guys. You're trying to preserve your body. Now, why did they do that? You can see how their belief changed, and I hope you saw the flaw in their belief, right? At the beginning, they only believed Pharaoh could enjoy the afterlife. Now, why would I, as a normal person, then listen to anybody because I got nothing to hope for? Only Pharaoh gets it. Well, one, he's going to protect Egypt. So if I'm nice to the Pharaoh in the afterlife, he'll protect me. But there was still a lack of motivation. So what they do? They changed their belief. Hey, everybody can enjoy the afterlife. But to enjoy the afterlife, you have to protect your body. And so we have to embalm it. We have to preserve it so that your body doesn't decay and return to dust like you studied in catechism a couple lessons ago. So let's figure out how they embalmed it. Before a body was embalmed, priests removed the body's organs. The organs were stored in special jars that were buried with the body. So guys, if you remember from my introduction, you had those jars. That's where we're putting the organs, and then we're in the process right here of embalming them. So not to be disgusting, but obviously you have to cut open the chest and stomach, get out all those organs, drain all the blood, because that's what causes you to rot from the inside out. All right, then the priest covered the body with a salt called natron and stored it for several days. The natron dried up the water in the body, causing it to shrink. The shrunken, dried body was then filled with burial spices and tightly wrapped with long strips of linen. The wrapped body was then known as a mummy. The mummy was sealed in a coffin and placed in a decorated tomb. Okay, so guys, you get the process. We pull out all your body organs. Then we stuff you with salt. Salt's like, guys, it's going to turn you into like, what's the best way to call it? Beef jerky? You know, it's going to pull all the water out of it. You're going to shrink up your skin. It's going to turn it into like a leather. Dries it all out, okay? So that's how you preserve the body with that. And then because Egypt is in a hot, dry climate, it works perfectly. Then you wrap it up, stuff it with some spices, place it in a coffin, and place that into a decorated tomb. And that's how you did the bodies with that. Okay, so that's embalming it. Wealthy people had their mummies placed in coffins and buried in tombs. Poor people had their mummies buried in caves or in the sand. Even animals were embalmed. Egyptians viewed animals not only as pets but also as sacred creatures. As a result, they buried the mummies of cats, birds, and other animals at temples honoring the gods and goddesses. So guys, if you needed it in the afterlife, it had to go with you into your tomb. Now the wealthy could pay for all those things to happen. And so it's kind of an interesting thought because what did I do? I had loved my pet cat and I died, and I wanted my pet cat with me in the afterlife. So what did the priests have to do? They had to kill the cat and mummify it so that could be with me in the afterlife. Okay, when we've dug up Pharaoh's tombs, guys, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow, but Pharaoh had a lot of servants that he wanted in the afterlife. What did that mean? That means the servants had to be killed and mummified right with the Pharaoh, along with all his wealth and other things that they took with it. Okay. The Egyptians learned much about the human body from embalming. This knowledge helped them develop basic medical skills. So you got your blank for number 15. Egyptian doctors know how to sew up cuts and set broken bones. They were the first to use splints, which means they were the first to put sticks on two sides of a broken bone to help it heal, kind of thing. Bandages and compression. Egyptians also wrote down medical information on papyrus scrolls. These records were the world's first medical books. So because we're learning how to preserve the body, guys, you learn a lot. Now, as we talk about our goal of what makes a culture unique, embalming is very unique to Egyptians, and then it allowed them to learn a lot about medical. A lot of other cultures didn't learn a lot about medicine. Why not? Because they didn't want to touch dead bodies. They certainly wouldn't cut dead bodies open. So other cultures think that's disrespectful. The Egyptians honored that. And so there's a total different result, guys, because of what their culture believed in. So Egyptian had a very unique culture, loyalty to Pharaoh no matter what, embalming into the dead, making sacrifices for the good of others, all things that they did. All right, we're going to stop there for today. We'll pick it up on the pyramids tomorrow.